Sharpe's Fortress by Bernard Cornwell. Read by Paul McGann. Richard Sharpe wanted to be a good officer, but it was like trying to light a tinderbox in a rain-filled wind. The men disliked him, ignored him, or were overfamiliar, while the battalion's officers plain disapproved of him. "You can put a racing saddle on a cart horse," Captain Urquhart had said one night in the ragged tent which passed for the officers' mess of the King's 74th. "But that don't make the beast quick." He'd not been talking about Ensign Sharpe, not directly, but all the other officers glanced at Sharpe. The battalion was stopped now in the middle of nowhere. It was hot as hell, and they were surrounded by tall crops that hid everything except the sky. A cannon fired to the north, but Sharpe had no way of knowing whether it was British or an enemy gun. The men of the company sat on the lip of a dry ditch as they waited for orders. One or two lay back and slept while Sergeant Colquhoun leafed slowly through his tattered Bible. "Looking for inspiration, Sergeant?" Sharpe asked. "I am not, sir," Colquhoun answered respectfully, but managing to convey that the question was still impertinent. So much of an up-bloody conversation, Sharpe thought. Another cannon fired, and this time a round shot whipped through the tall plants. "I've found it," Colquhoun said gravely. "Found what?" Sharpe asked. "I was sure the good book mentioned millet, sir. Ezekiel, the 4th chapter and the 9th verse. Take thou also unto thee wheat, and barley, and millet, and make thee bread thereof. It pleases me, sir," he explained, "to see things, and imagine my Lord and Saviour seeing the self-same things." "But why millet?" Sharpe asked. "These crops, sir, are millet." "Millet, eh?" Sharpe said. The plants were 10 feet high. Must be a bastard to harvest. But he got no response. Sergeant Colquhoun always tried to ignore swear words. It was a good company, Sharpe reflected. Urquhart ran it well. Colquhoun was a magnificent sergeant, and the last thing it needed was a brand-new ensign who, 2 months before, had been a sergeant. I should have stayed a sergeant, Sharpe thought, wishing he was back in the Seringapatam armory with Major Stokes. That had been the life. And Simone Joubert, the Frenchwoman who had clung to Sharpe after the battle at Assaye, had gone back to Seringapatam to wait for him. Sharpe had given her some of the Tipu's jewels so she could live comfortably. Colquhoun suddenly barked orders, and the men formed into 4 ranks and began trudging northwards along the irrigation ditch. Sharpe meekly followed. Captain Urquhart spurred his horse back down the ditch. "The rascals are waiting ahead," Urquhart told Sharpe. The captain was a fine-looking man with a stern face, straight back and steady nerve. "We'll be wheeling to the right soon," he called to Colquhoun. "Forming line on the right in 2 ranks." "Aye, sir." There was a sudden crash of guns as a whole battery of enemy cannon opened fire. Sharpe heard the round shots whipping through the millet. The battalion's pipers had started playing, and the men picked up their feet. Sharpe coughed sweat from his eyes. He wore an officer's red tailcoat with the white facings of the 74th. The coat had belonged to a Lieutenant Blaine, who had died at Assaye. Sharpe had sewn up the bullet hole. He wore a cavalry sabre, which he did not like. The other officers carried claymores, big, straight-bladed and lethal, and Sharpe should have equipped himself with one, but he had balked at the prices. He could have bought every claymore in the auction of dead officers' effects, but he had not wanted to give the impression of being wealthy. A man like Sharpe was not supposed to have money. He was up from the ranks, a common soldier, but he had hacked down a half-dozen men to save Wellesley's life, and the general had rewarded Sergeant Sharpe by making him into an officer, and Ensign Sharpe was too canny to let his new battalion know he possessed a dead king's fortune. The jewels he had taken from the Tipu Sultan at Seringapatam. "Line to the right," Sergeant Colquhoun shouted, and the company wheeled right into 2 ranks. The ditch had emerged from the millet to join a wide, dry riverbed, and Sharpe looked northwards to see gun smoke on the horizon. Mahratta guns. "Halt!" Urquhart called. "Face front!" The 78th, another Highland battalion, was on their right, and on either side were long lines of Madrasi sepoys. Somewhere off to the left was another Scottish regiment, the 94th. So today there were 3 Scottish and 10 sepoy battalions attacking the Mahrattas. Though the Scots reckoned they could have done the job by themselves.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?